Hi, my name is Anna Monroe. I'm a service designer with the lab at OPM. And today I'd like to share with you a project that has a lot of interesting parts, not least of which is that it's the result of a collaboration between three agencies. The first one is OPM and our group, the lab. The second one is the Department of Veterans Affairs and a group there called the Veterans Experience Office. And the third one is the Customer Experience Office in GSA, the General Services Administration. I think that all of us in the federal government really want to work across agency lines, and we're all familiar with how incredibly difficult that is. So the fact that this project really came from three separate agencies, I think, is a really, really exciting part of its story. So the products I'm referring to, and I say products because as you can see, there are four of them, are the Human-Centered Design Discovery Stage Field Guides. The first one is the one on the far left of the screen there, and we made this for VEO. And after it was finished, GSA noticed it and said, hey, we really think that this has application across the federal space. Is there any way that we can unpeel it from sort of a veteran-centric overview and make it a real interagency guide? And so we did that. And at the same time, we noticed that we had a product niche that needed filling, which is exactly how product design kind of goes. You make one thing and then you realize you've only touched the tip of the iceberg. We needed an operations guide, an explicit how-to of how to do the discovery stage of human-centered design. So this is a story about making a human-centered design discovery stage field guide through the process of human-centered design itself. It's a little meta, but I think you'll get the picture. The first stage, of course, is discovery. That's research. Then we design something, like we designed the guides. And then there's delivery, which is implementation, and measurement, which is important so that you can validate, the impact of your product. We focused here in the discovery phase when we made our product because, unsurprisingly, in the course of our research to make the product, we realized that our federal colleagues have incredibly deep and useful and interesting knowledge both institutionally and in terms of their skill set. We actually don't really need our federal colleagues to walk away from their skill sets. We need to give them ways to use those skill sets more effectively. Because a lot of times in the federal space, we find ourselves in one of these two places, right? We're either way up in the clouds, 30,000 feet, or we're stuck in a spreadsheet and we can't possibly get out. We're always sort of way too small or way too large, and there's not a ton you can do from either one of these extreme positions. We need to sort of find our way in the middle. And how do we do that? How do we get out of a spreadsheet or get down from the clouds? Well, human-centered design is one of the methodologies that can help us do that, and it does it by really narrowing down if you've got too big of a problem or extrapolating out if you're really too tactical. The discovery phase is literally research. And again, because our federal colleagues have such great depth of knowledge, they don't need to explicitly learn something new. They just need a rigorous, replicable, and methodologically sound way to show the depth of their knowledge and the research that they can perform when talking to their own customers every day. So the story of the guide goes like this. From September to October in 2016, a colleague from our group and I performed at least 28 interviews. And I say at least because this was actually just the amount of interviews I could find on my calendar when I scrolled back. There were definitely more. And human-centered design interviews are more like guided conversations than they are like formal interviews. And that's important because what we were trying to find out when we were doing the research for the Human-Centered Design Guide is, what do our federal colleagues need? What are they looking for in how to talk to their customers? So we don't know, so we can't ask direct questions. We need to hear about their experience. We also read 4 extant HCD guides. There are lots of human-centered design guides out there from giant firms like IBM and IDEO. One question that designers always ask themselves is, why make a new thing? Do we actually need a new thing? Or will a thing that already exists be a good fit? So we read these, and I think a couple more as well, actually, and we found that there was a lack, and that lack was none of these guides went very, very deeply into the discovery phase. And that is what our conversations with our federal colleagues told us. We need to concentrate on discovery. So at the end of our research, our discovery phase, we also had a prototyping session. So we're moving from discovery into design now. And this one prototyping session is really important because you have to start with something. You have to make something at a very low level of effort so that you can go out and test it. And when you go out and test it, you also have to remember to bring along leadership. So over the course of October to March, that's October 2016 to March 2017, we had 3 separate meetings with leadership. And I'm not talking about just sort of like updates. I'm talking about major milestone meetings where they asked us, what have you been doing with your time? And we really had to bring them along with us on the journey of making these guides because, they're investing time in us and in the development of this product. Through the same space of time, we had 10 applied prototype tests. That means that first prototype that I just referenced was changed 10 times in application in the field. So we went out with Veterans Experience Office employees and we used the guide in conversations with VA medical center directors, with members of veteran service organizations, with veterans themselves. And each time we had these conversations and each time we used the guide to frame up those conversations, we revised it. So that was 10 times in the field that we did that. We did it so many times, in fact, that we ended up at version 7.32. So just in version 7, we ended up with 224 versions of this human-centered design guide. And that's a lot. So, of course, now we're just at version 8. We've versioned ourselves up. And this is what it looks like today. We're really excited about it because we feel like we fulfilled a need that was missing in the human-centered design guides that already exist. And that is that deep dive into discovery. And it is the deep dive in a consumable way. This isn't a very lengthy document. It uses, as you can see, diagrammatic illustrations to really talk about these complex methods that we're trying to get people to practice. And as I said before, while we were doing this, we found another need. And that was for the operations guide. So the entire research and prototyping method that I just went through, we did it again for the operations guide. So that one was a little bit more circumscribed because we knew where we were going, right? We had identified a need. We had already made a guide, so we had sort of form factors in place. But we knew we needed how-to because this one, we really concentrated on the concepts of human-centered design. It has some steps in there, but as you can see from this slide, there are some like actual checkboxes in the operations guide. And it's definitely the how as opposed to the concepts and the why. Which brings me to my next point. Why? Why would you go through all this? This is a lot of work. This product development is not cheap in terms of time. It's not cheap in terms of labor. It's not cheap in terms of travel. What is the compelling reason to actually go through a human-centered design process? To answer that, I'll break it out into 2 parts. The first part explicitly speaks to the lab's mission of capacity building. While my colleagues and I were developing this guide, we were creating with the Veterans Experience Office employees the thing that they needed. So we were modeling for them the process of human-centered design while making the human-centered design guide. So we were really fulfilling one of the lab's core missions of capacity building in the federal space through this application and this practice and this modeling of development of a product. To make it more broad, there are 3 core reasons why you would want to go through this process from my point of view in terms of overall product design, whether inside the federal government or outside of it. The first one is products that are developed like this result in easy user adoption. If you talk to your users when you're making a thing, they see themselves in that product and they will more easily adopt it. The product will answer their needs. You will not have this huge learning curve when it comes to uptake of this product. The second one is cost avoidance. All those prototyping sessions that we did, all those tests that we did, mean that we failed in our prototypes at a very low cost. It's much cheaper to fail 10 times in a small way than one time in a national way. So you really do set yourself up to avoid spending a lot of money on a thing that then you kind of have to revise really, really extensively. And the third reason, sorry, is long-term products. These products tend to have a longer shelf life because they were developed with the people who will use them. They are able to just be tweaked as circumstances change, as opposed to having to be wholesale taken down and redesigned, which, as we know, is a really costly process. So, where are we in the human-centered design discovery stage field guides development? Well, we're sort of here. We're in the middle of delivery, and that also means we're in the middle of measure. So, when you make a implementation plan to deliver the product to your audience, you really need to build in measurement as well. We are constructing some quantitative things to ask people, like how many hours did it take you to get through these guides? How many people have you distributed it to? How many projects have you used it on? And then we also need to ask some qualitative questions, like when did you feel that you had actually been able to grasp the material? How difficult was it to do that? How do you feel about going and talking to your customers right now? So these two sides, the qual and the quant, will really allow us to understand the impact of our product. And that's important because that's how you can know if all of your efforts have really paid off or not. And you do have to build those into the delivery stage, set yourself up to go gather those measurements. So again, my name is Anna Monroe. I am a service designer with the lab at OPM, and this was the product story of the Human-Centered Design Discovery Stage Field Guides. Thank you.